Life is winning against me. The score is 10-0. This isn't just a saying. It is the cold, hard reality of my existence. It is a metaphor for the chasm that now separates me from the person I once was, from the normal life I once lived. Imagine a football match. One team is dominant, scoring goal after goal without response. The other team, my team, is utterly defeated, demoralized, and staring at a scoreboard that reads 10-0. The crowd has fallen silent, the hope has drained away, and the final whistle feels like a mercy. This is where I find myself, standing on a field of shattered dreams, looking up at an impossible score. Before this, I was on a level playing field with everyone else. I had a family, I had a job, I had the trust of those around me. We were all playing the same game, with the same rules and the same opportunities. But then I made a choice, a series of choices, that led me down a different path. I stepped onto a different field, one where the house always wins. I started gambling. Now that level playing field is a distant memory. I am no longer playing alongside my peers. I am far, far below them, trapped in a game I can no longer afford to play, but one I feel compelled to continue. The 10-0 score represents the monumental effort required just to break even. For the losing team in that football match, a miracle is needed. It would take an unprecedented surge of energy, luck and skill just to score a single goal to make it 10-1. To even dream of a draw, to reach 10-10 is a fantasy. It is beyond the realm of possibility. That is my life now. Just to get back to zero, to the starting point where everyone else stands, requires a miracle of its own. I'm not even thinking about winning anymore. I'm just trying to stop the bleeding, to prevent the score from becoming 11-0, 12-0. This is the crushing weight of my addiction. It is not just about the money lost, though the sums are staggering. It is about the loss of time, of trust, of relationships, of self-respect. Each loss is a goal conceded, pushing me further and further behind. Every day I wake up to this reality, the scoreboard looming over me, a constant reminder of how far I have fallen. It is a game that feels rigged, a match I was never meant to win. The opponent is relentless, and I am exhausted. This is the story of how I found myself losing so badly in the game of life. My situation is like standing at the bottom of a deep pit. Imagine a hole dug into the earth 6 feet deep, the dimensions of a grave. I am down there, in the cold, packed dirt, looking up at the sky. Everyone else is walking around on the surface, living their lives in the sunlight. They are on level ground. For me to even reach that level, to stand where they stand, I must first fill the hole I am in. I have to shovel back all the earth I have displaced, pack it down, and climb my way out just to get back to the starting line. Only then can I even think about moving forward, about climbing a mountain or building something of my own. This pit represents the debt, both financial and emotional, that I have dug for myself. It is a hole created by countless bad decisions, fueled by the desperate, insatiable urge to gamble. Every bet I lost was another shovelful of dirt thrown out of the hole, making it deeper and wider. Every lie I told to cover my tracks was another layer of earth removed, making the walls steeper and the climb out more treacherous. I didn't just stumble into this pit, I actively dug it day after day, believing that the next big win was the ladder that would lift me out. Instead, it was just another shovel. The people I love, my wife, my parents, stand at the edge of this pit. They have thrown down ropes, offered helping hands, and even lowered themselves down to try and pull me up. They have borrowed money, sacrificed their own security, and endured immense pain to help me fill this hole. They poured their love, their trust, and their resources into the darkness where I was trapped. But the nature of my addiction is a cruel one. It convinced me to take their help, not to fill the pit, but to dig it even deeper, always chasing the illusion that the next bet would be the one to save me. Now, the depth of this pit is almost overwhelming. The sunlight seems so far away. The voices of those on the surface sound distant and muffled. To be a normal person again, to be the man I was before, feels like an impossible task. First, I must contend with the 6 feet of debt, deceit, and destruction that I have created. I have to claw my way back to ground level, a feat that will require more strength and honesty than I have ever shown. This is the starting point of my recovery, acknowledging the depth of the hole and the monumental task of filling it, one handful of earth at a time. The most insidious part of a gambling addiction is the constant nagging belief that you can win it all back. This isn't just a hope, it becomes a desperate conviction. My primary motivation for returning to the betting shops again and again was not the thrill of the win itself. It was the burning need to recoup what I had lost. The thought, "These people can't win me, I want my money back," became a mantra. It was a declaration of war against an enemy that could not lose, an enemy that owned the very battlefield on which I fought. This desperate chase for what was already gone was the engine of my self-destruction. The logic is perversely simple. The only way to get back the money you have lost through betting is to place another bet. It creates a closed loop of despair. You lose 100 naira. The sting of that loss compels you to bet again to recover it. You lose another 100. Now you are down 200. You keep playing, chasing the initial loss, but the hole only gets deeper. Then one day, a small victory arrives. You win 50 naira. For a fleeting moment, there is a rush of relief, a flicker of hope. But the math is unforgiving. You are still down 150 naira. This small win is the cruelest trick of all. It doesn't satisfy, it fuels the fire. The addiction whispers in your ear, "See? You can win. Now use that 50 naira to win back the rest." So, you stake your winnings, driven by the urge to get back to even. And almost inevitably, you lose it. You are now back where you started, only with more frustration and a renewed sense of desperation. The cycle repeats, with the losses accumulating far faster than the wins. You are constantly trying to climb a landslide, where every step forward is met with 3 steps sliding back into the abyss. People might think that I'm only speaking out now because I have lost so much. They might say that if I had won big I would be singing a different tune, but they miss the fundamental truth. You can never truly win against the house. The system is designed for you to lose. Even those who build houses or buy cars with their winnings are living on borrowed time. The addiction doesn't just go away because you had a lucky streak. If you are not careful, you will lose the house, the car, and everything else you hold dear. It is a path that, for me, has led to only one destination: total ruin. I did not begin my life on a path destined for ruin, far from it. I grew up in a home built on a strong foundation of religion and morality. My parents were devout people, and their faith was not just a Sunday affair, it was the very fabric of our daily lives. They taught us the difference between right and wrong with a clarity that left no room for ambiguity. Their lessons were not delivered as harsh doctrines, but as gentle guidance, rooted in love and a genuine desire for us to lead good, honorable lives. We were shown the righteous path and the path of temptation, and then given the freedom to choose, a responsibility they believed was essential for true character. My father, a man I deeply respected, was a pillar of integrity. He worked hard, provided for us without complaint, and lived by a strict moral code. My mother was the heart of our family, her kindness and piety a constant source of comfort and strength. They instilled in us a deep sense of right and wrong. We learned that honesty was paramount, that trust was a sacred bond, not to be broken, and that shortcuts in life often led to dead ends. Gambling in all its forms was viewed as a vice, a lazy and dishonest way to seek gain, a temptation that preyed on the weak and led only to sorrow. I absorbed these lessons and they became part of my identity. We were taught to be content with what we had, to find joy in simple things, and to place our faith in God, not in chance. The world of betting was completely alien to our household. I remember seeing the old pool shops when I was younger, places filled with men huddled over papers, surrounded by the haze of smoke and the sharp smell of cheap gin. I would look at them with a mixture of confusion and disdain, wondering what could possibly be so captivating about staring at a board. It was a world I had no interest in, a world my upbringing had conditioned me to avoid at all costs. I was proud of that distance. Looking back, it is this very foundation that makes my fall so much more tragic and difficult to comprehend, not just for my family, but for myself. I was the son who was supposed to uphold these values. I was seen as a religious person, a moral person, someone who knew better. The irony is suffocating. I had been given all the tools to resist the very demon that would come to consume me. The values my parents worked so hard to build within me became the high walls from which I would eventually, and spectacularly, fall. The shame is not just in the act itself, but in the betrayal of my own upbringing. It all began innocently enough, as these things often do. The year was 2015. I was in my second year of my national diploma program, a young man focused on his studies and his future. Our student residential area was plagued by frequent power outages, a common frustration. This led to a daily ritual of seeking out places with electricity to charge our phones, a vital link to our studies and families. Phone theft was rampant, so we had to be vigilant, never letting our devices out of our sight. I had a friend, someone I trusted, who would often take my phone to a nearby game center to charge it for me. I saw him as a good person, even a religious one. someone I looked up to. One day he changed the routine. "You know what?" he said, "I won't take your phone to the game center alone today. It's better if you come with me." His reasoning seemed sound. With the risk of theft, it was safer for me to be there in person to watch over my own property. I had no reason to suspect any other motive. He was simply being a concerned friend. So I went with him. He led me to the place, a bustling hub of activity, filled with the sounds of video games and the low murmur of conversations. He showed me where to plug in my phone and we settled in to wait. It was in this game center that I was first properly exposed to the world of sports betting. I had always hated it, dismissing it as a foolish waste of time and money. I would see others engrossed in it and think, what are you guys even seeing in this thing? It was their cup of tea, certainly not mine. I had no desire to indulge, no curiosity to satisfy. My only experience with anything similar was the distant memory of the old pool shops, a world I found utterly baffling. Even to this day, I have no idea how that game works. My addiction, when it came, would be focused solely on sports. As I sat there guarding my phone while it charged, my friend began to talk about the betting slips, the odds, the teams. He pointed to the board, trying to explain the appeal. I was dismissive, uninterested. My mind was on my studies, my future, and the values I held dear. The thought of risking my hard-earned pocket money on the outcome of a football match seemed absurd. I was there for one reason only, to charge my phone. I had no idea that this simple, practical errand was the first step into a trap, a lure set by a trusted friend that would slowly, insidiously, pull me into the abyss. My friend was relentless, urging me to try betting, insisting that beginners like me often win. I resisted, valuing my pocket money, but his pressure wore me down. Finally, I gave in. "Just 100 naira, I said, hoping to end his persistence. I picked a random option, clueless, and waited for the results. I lost. The money was gone. But instead of walking away, I felt a strange curiosity. Why did I lose? Could I win next time? That first small loss didn't scare me off. It planted a dangerous seed. After my first loss, regret lingered, but my friend soon tempted me again. I hesitated, but the itch to try returned, and I placed another random bet. This time, I won. 2,500 naira from a 100 naira stake. The rush was intoxicating. It felt like I'd found a secret to easy money. I promised myself I'd stop, take my winnings, and never return. But the thrill of that win erased my caution. I didn't realize it then, but the real danger had just begun. The first win is the most dangerous. It makes you believe it's possible. I tried to walk away after my win, but the memory of easy money haunted me. Occasionally I'd place another bet, telling myself it was just for fun. Losses started to outweigh wins, but I kept chasing that first high. The urge to recoup losses grew stronger, turning play into compulsion. I'd bet more, take bigger risks, and lose even more. Each loss deepened the hole, but I couldn't stop. What began as a choice was quickly becoming an uncontrollable habit. The gambler's logic is warped. I kept betting, convinced I could win my money back. Small wins felt like proof I was close to breaking even as my losses mounted. Each win was bait, keeping me hooked and chasing recovery. I'd stake my winnings, lose them, and end up deeper in debt. The obsession to recover losses became all-consuming. The math was simple. The more I played, the more I lost. Wins were never enough. They only fueled the cycle. The system was designed to keep me playing and losing. The truth is brutal. You can never beat the house. The odds, the system, everything is built for the house to win. Even big wins are traps. They breed arrogance and deeper addiction. I've never seen anyone build a lasting life from betting. Only fleeting highs and devastating losses. The house is patient and ruthless. It always wins in the end. Fighting it is like emptying the ocean with a teaspoon. In the end, you drown. The descent into addiction is a slow and subtle process of transformation. You don't just wake up one day and decide to be a gambler. Instead, your identity is slowly eroded and replaced. Before this all began, my identity was clear. I was a son, a student, a religious person, a moral person. I was someone who didn't smoke, didn't drink to excess, and wasn't a womanizer. I was known for my potential, for being dependable and trustworthy. These were the pillars of my self-worth, the things that defined me in the eyes of my family and my community. But as the betting took over, a new, darker identity began to form in the shadows. This new identity was singular in its focus. The gambler cared about one thing and one thing only, the next bet. The needs of my family, the responsibilities of my job, the requirements of my education, they all became secondary. They were obstacles and distractions from the primary mission of chasing my losses. When I was working and earning a salary, my family never enjoyed the fruits of my labor. The money didn't go towards building a better life for us. Instead, it was funneled directly into the betting accounts. My mind was constantly preoccupied, lost in a world of odds, scores, and potential payouts. I was physically present, but my true self was somewhere else entirely. The gambler is a creature of deceit. He has to be. To feed the addiction, I had to sell my possessions one by one. My wife would notice things missing from our home. "Why are you selling this?" she would ask, her voice filled with confusion and concern. I would spin a web of lies, creating false excuses about needing money for some urgent imaginary project. "Where is the money from your job?" she would press. "Aren't you working?" And I would lie again, assuring her that I was, that everything was fine, all while knowing that every naira I earned was being sacrificed to the addiction. The shame of these lies was immense, but the compulsion to bet was always stronger. This transformation was complete. The good son, the promising student, the trustworthy employee, he was gone. In his place was the gambler, a man I didn't recognize and couldn't control. I was digging a hole for myself, and with every bet I was drilling deeper and deeper into the earth. It was a terrifying realization when it finally dawned on me. This wasn't just a bad habit or a phase I was going through, it was who I had become. My entire existence had been hijacked by this singular, destructive pursuit. Everything I once was had been sacrificed at the altar of the bet. Life has a way of rewarding potential. People saw something in me. My diligence, my apparent integrity, and the very moral foundation my parents had built, all combined to create an image of a trustworthy young man. This perception opened doors for me, leading to an elevation at my job, a position of significant responsibility. They entrusted me with company money, not just a small amount, but funds that I was supposed to manage, to safeguard, to use for the business's operations. This was the ultimate test of character, a direct reflection of the faith that my superiors had placed in me. They saw me as a safe pair of hands, someone above the fray of petty temptations. They couldn't have been more wrong. The irony was suffocating. I am not a person who indulges in frivolous things. You would never see me wasting money on expensive watches, designer clothes, or lavish nights out. People would ask me, "Do you smoke?" I do not smoke. "Do you drink?" I do not drink. "Are you a womanizer?" I am not. I had none of the typical vices that one might associate with a person who is careless with money. My slate was clean, except for one deep dark stain. I had one all-consuming demon betting. This one bad thing was enough to corrupt everything else, to turn my strengths into a facade that hid a terrible secret. And so, the inevitable happened. The company money, resting in my care, became a target for my addiction. It wasn't a premeditated plan to steal, it was a gradual, insidious process. The gambler's mind is a master of justification. It whispered to me that I could just borrow a small amount, win big, and return the funds before anyone would notice. It was a flawless plan, a victimless crime. I would solve my personal debt crisis and fulfill my professional duties simultaneously. So, I took some of the funds, I took the trust they had given me, converted it into cash, and I used it to gamble. Of course, I lost. The flawless plan shattered on impact, the money was gone, vanished into the bottomless pit of the betting company. The initial feeling was not guilt, but sheer cold panic. The hole I had been digging for myself had suddenly become a chasm. This was no longer just about my own money or my own possessions. I had crossed a line, a point of no return. I had betrayed a sacred trust, committed a crime, and put my entire future, my freedom, and my family's name at risk. The quiet desperation that had been humming in the background of my life now became a deafening scream. I had to cover it up, and I had to do it fast. In a state of pure terror, I ran to the only sanctuary I have ever known, my family. I knew I couldn't tell them the whole truth. The words I gambled it away were impossible to form. My parents are moral to the core, religious to the core. To confess that their son, the one they raised to be righteous, was not only a gambler but had also misappropriated company funds, was unthinkable. It would have broken their hearts in a way I couldn't bear to witness. So I constructed another lie. A vague but urgent story of a terrible mistake, a financial problem that needed to be solved immediately. I went to my parents, my voice trembling, and pleaded with them. "Please," I begged, "you have to help me. I need you to quickly rally around me, to get some funds so the company won't find out." The urgency and fear in my eyes were real, even if the reason was a fabrication. They saw their son in desperate trouble, his future hanging by a thread. They didn't hesitate. They did what loving parents do. They moved heaven and earth to protect their child. They sprang into action, calling on whatever resources they could muster to come up with the money I needed. The sacrifice they made was immense. This was not their money. They did not have vast savings tucked away for such an emergency. To save me, they had to go into debt themselves. They had to borrow the money, putting their own financial security on the line for my sake. My dear wife, my supportive, loving partner, also contributed. She had to lend money again, money she likely did not have to spare, trusting that it was for a legitimate and desperate need. They formed a circle of protection around me, pulling together this significant sum of money, over 500,000 naira, to put back into the company's account and make the problem disappear. They handed me the money, their faces etched with worry but also with love. It was a lifeline, a second chance bought with their sacrifice. They believed they were saving me from a one-time catastrophic error. They saw me as their moral, religious son who had stumbled badly and needed their help to get back on his feet. They had no idea that they were handing this lifeline to the very demon they were trying to save me from. They did not know that they were not filling a hole but merely providing a bigger shovel to the man trapped inside it. Here is where the story turns from a tragedy into something grotesque. This is the part that demonstrates the absolute insanity of addiction. I stood there, holding the money that my family had sacrificed so much to gather. This was their borrowed money, their trust made tangible. It was the solution to my immediate crisis, the key to avoiding prosecution and disgrace. The logical, rational, and moral path was clear. Take the money directly to my workplace, deposit it back into the company account, and breathe a sigh of relief. I would have to live with the secret, but the immediate danger would be averted. That was the path of a sane man. But I was not a sane man. I was an addict. And the addict's mind saw the situation very differently. Holding that large sum of cash, over 500,000 naira, didn't feel like a rescue. It felt like an opportunity. The gambler's brain, hijacked by compulsion, saw this not as bailout money but as the ultimate stake. It whispered the most seductive lie of all. With this much money you can't lose. You can win back everything you've ever lost. The original company funds, all your personal losses, everything. You can pay back your parents, pay back your wife, and still have a fortune left over. You can fix everything in one go. And the funnest part, in the darkest, most twisted sense of the word, is that I listened to that voice. Instead of walking to my office to right my wrong, I walked towards the world of betting. I took the money my parents and wife had borrowed to save me from the consequences of gambling, and I used it to gamble again. It is an act so profoundly selfish and destructive that it is hard to even comprehend now. I chose the addiction over my family's sacrifice. I chose the long-shot bet over the certain rescue. I chose the demon over the angels who were trying to pull me out of the fire. It was gone in a flash, the entire sum, over 500,000 naira, lost. It vanished just like all the other money before it, sucked into the black hole of betting. The brief, manic hope of winning it all back was instantly replaced by a level of despair I had never known. The situation was now exponentially worse. Not only was the original company money still missing, but now the bailout money was gone too. I had not only failed to fix the problem, I had betrayed my family in the most profound way imaginable, squandering their love and sacrifice on the very addiction that was destroying me. I had lost everything, twice. The loss of the bailout money was the point of total implosion. I was now in a hole so deep I couldn't even see the light anymore. The debt was astronomical. It wasn't just the company money, it was the money I owed my parents, my wife, and several friends who had lent me funds along the way. I had lost everything. The pressure was unbearable, and the need for cash, for any amount of cash to place another recovery bet, became my sole reason for being. My home, the sanctuary I shared with my wife, became a resource to be plundered. I started selling our possessions. It began with small things, items my wife might not notice were missing right away. But as my desperation grew, so did the scale of the sales. A television, a stereo, furniture, kitchen appliances, anything that could be converted into cash was sold off for a fraction of its worth. If I go to my house now, I have nothing again. I literally sold everything. I dismantled our life together piece by piece to feed the insatiable hunger of the addiction. Each sale was another lie, another betrayal of the woman who had stood by me. My wife, my poor, trusting wife, kept noticing the empty spaces in our home. "Why are you selling this thing?" she would ask, her voice a mixture of confusion and growing suspicion. I became a master of evasion, a prolific liar. I would invent elaborate stories about needing the money for an urgent investment, a business opportunity, or to help a friend in need. She kept asking the hard questions. What happened? Where is the money that you earn? Are you not working? I would look her in the eye and assure her that I was, that everything was under control, all while my world was collapsing around me. The cruelest part of this phase was the false hope the addiction would provide. Out of the vast sums I was losing, I would occasionally have a small win. If I had lost, say, 200,000 naira from selling our belongings, I might win back 25,000 or even 50,000 naira. This small return was not a relief, it was gasoline on the fire. It reinforced the insane belief that I could still win my capital back. It kept me going, selling more, betting more, and digging the hole deeper and deeper. I was drilling into the very foundation of my marriage and my life, and the drill just kept spinning. You cannot hide a hole the size of 500,000 naira forever. Eventually, the financial discrepancies at my workplace were going to be noticed. The day of reckoning, the one I had tried so desperately to avoid, finally arrived. The questions started. Audits were conducted. The numbers didn't add up, and all signs pointed directly to me. There were no more lies I could tell, no more evasions that would work. The truth, in all its ugly detail, was coming out whether I wanted it to or not. The trust my employers had placed in me was shattered, and their disappointment was palpable. The fall from grace was swift and brutal. I lost my job. It wasn't a dramatic firing in a boardroom, it was quieter, colder, and somehow more terrifying. They told me I should go for now and that they would write to me. This vague, non-committal dismissal was heavy with unspoken threats. It left me in a state of limbo, suspended between unemployment and potential legal prosecution. The fear was immense. I knew they had every right to involve the authorities, to have me arrested and charged. My professional life, which had once been so promising, was over. I had destroyed my own career through my own foolish, compulsive actions. This was over 3 months ago. The situation is still pending, a dark cloud hanging over my head. This is not a story from the distant past. The wounds are fresh, the consequences immediate and ongoing. It is only by what I can describe as God's salvation that I am still here, that I'm not learning this lesson in a much harder way, from behind bars. Every day I wake up with the fear that today might be the day I receive that letter, the one that calls me to account for what I have done. The loss of the job was more than just a loss of income, it was the loss of my identity as a productive member of society. With the job gone, the final pillar supporting my fragile world crumbled. I had no income, I had a mountain of debt, my home was an empty shell, and my family was about to find out the full, horrifying extent of my deception. I knew the company would eventually demand the money back, and with no job and no resources, there was no way for me to source it. The time for lies was over. I had to confess. I had to pick up the phone and tell my family everything. I had to tell them that I had failed them, betrayed them, and lost everything they had given me. With no job, no money, and no more lies to hide behind, the moment I dreaded most had arrived. I had to confess everything. I summoned what little courage I had left and called my family. I told them the whole sordid story. I admitted that the initial financial trouble was not some unfortunate mistake, but the result of a gambling addiction. I confessed that the bailout money, the money they had sacrificed to borrow for me, was also gone, lost in the same destructive pursuit. I laid my sins bare, revealing the true depth of my deception. The silence on the other end of the line was heavier than any words could have been. I had finally detonated the bomb I had been building for years. The reaction was exactly what I expected and feared. They were very, very disappointed. The word disappointed feels too small, too inadequate to capture the seismic shockwave that tore through my family. It was a profound sense of betrayal. My father, the man whose moral example I was supposed to follow, was crushed. They had raised me in the line of faith and integrity, and I had strayed so far from that path that I was unrecognizable. I was their religious son, their moral son, and I had been living a secret life consumed by a vice they could barely comprehend. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on me, suffocating me. In the wake of this revelation, my world completely fell apart. The last vestiges of my old life were stripped away. The fear of losing my job had been a constant torment, but now it was a reality. I had lost it. The fear of failing my final year of school became a looming specter. My exams were just a month away, and the tuition fees, which had doubled in the last year to over 200,000 naira, were an impossible sum. How could I possibly source that money now? I had no job, a mountain of debt, and a family reeling from my betrayal. Everything was down. It was in this moment that I truly understood what it meant to hit the bottom. The weight of it all became too much to bear. The disappointment in my parents' eyes, the loss of my career, the impending failure of my education, the crushing debt, it all converged into a single, overwhelming thought: suicide. I felt that I had disappointed the entire world. There was no way forward, no path to redemption. The only way to stop the pain, to erase the shame, was to erase myself. The thought took root and began to grow, a dark and tempting solution to a life that felt utterly and irredeemably ruined. I had lost everything, and now I was ready to lose myself as well. The thought of suicide was not just a fleeting dark fantasy, it became a concrete plan. I went out and I bought a sniper, a small bottle of potent poison. I carried it with me in my bag, a secret and final solution to all my problems. I would have been dead by now if not for a moment of what I can only describe as divine intervention. A mother's intuition that defied all logic. My mother, her heart already broken by my confession, looked at me with an intensity I had never seen before. She must have sensed something, a shift in my despair, a darkness that went beyond just shame. "What's in your bag?" she asked, her voice sharp with a sudden, inexplicable fear. I tried to brush it off, to lie one last time. "Nothing, nothing," I said, trying to pull the bag away from her, but she was insistent. She has never been a forceful person, but in that moment she was possessed by a desperate strength. She grabbed the bag from me, a raw and uncharacteristic act of force. She unzipped it and her hand found the bottle. She pulled it out and looked at it, and then at me. I saw the realization dawn on her face, followed by a wave of horror and grief so profound it seemed to steal the air from the room. She was down. I felt it in her, the crushing weight of a mother who had not only lost her son to addiction, but had almost lost him to death. The shame of that moment was absolute. Seeing the pain I had inflicted on my mother was worse than any punishment. I couldn't bear to stay in that house, to face her, to face my father's disappointment. I had to run, so I fled. I packed a few things, left my smartphone behind so I couldn't be tracked, took a small basic phone with a new SIM card and ran away from home. I traveled to a neighboring state, a place where I knew no one, a place where I could be anonymous in my misery. The primary reason for running was fear. I was convinced the company would soon press charges, and the next step would be a legal prosecution, an arrest. I believed that by disappearing, I could escape the consequences. But as I put distance between myself and my family, a new, more terrible thought began to creep in. If the company couldn't find me, who would they go after? They would go to my parents. They would take someone close to me, hold them responsible. The idea of my family, already suffering so much because of me, having to face legal threats on my behalf, was a pain greater than my own fear. The thought of my father or mother being harassed by the authorities because of my cowardice was unbearable. It was a flawed and selfish plan, and the realization hit me hard. I had run away to escape the fire, only to realize I had left my family tied up inside the burning house. My arrival in the neighboring state was not an escape, it was an exile into a harsher reality. I had no one. There were no familiar faces, no friends to call, no place to go. I was utterly alone, adrift in a sea of strangers. The first few days were a blur of aimless wandering. I walked the streets like a madman, my mind a chaotic storm of fear, shame, and regret. The man who once had a respectable job, a loving family, and a comfortable home was now a nameless, faceless figure on the street. I felt life in a way I never had before, a raw and brutal existence stripped of all comfort and dignity. When night fell, the reality of my situation became starkly clear. I had nowhere to sleep. The first night, I found a partially hidden corner beside a busy road and lay down on the cold, hard ground. The sounds of the city, the cars rushing past, the distant sirens, all served as a soundtrack to my despair. I, a man from a good family, a well-to-do person by any reasonable measure, was sleeping on the street like a vagrant. I had brought myself to this point. This wasn't a cruel twist of fate, it was the direct consequence of my choices. I had gambled away my bed, my home, my life. I slept there for 3, maybe 4 nights, each one colder and longer than the last. It was there in the dirt and grime of the roadside that something began to shift inside me. Lying there with nothing left to lose, I finally came face to face with the demon that had ruined me. I realized that running away was not the answer. I could run to another state, another country, but I could not run from myself. The addiction was inside me, and until I confronted it, it would follow me wherever I went. I had been totally, completely wrecked. This was rock bottom. From this vantage point, looking up from the gutter, I knew I had to stop. I had to kill this thing, this compulsion, before it completely erased what little was left of me. This period of homelessness was a brutal but necessary crucible. It burned away the last of my pride and my delusions. I was no longer a gambler chasing a win. I was a desperate man just trying to survive. I was hungry. The gnawing emptiness in my stomach was a constant physical reminder of the emptiness in my life. I had to beg to feed myself, a humbling experience that shattered my ego. In this state, a place known for being harsh and unforgiving, you hardly see people giving you anything for free. Every scrap of food was a struggle. It was here, at my lowest point, that I finally understood I had to make a real change, not just for my family but for my own survival. Driven by a desperate, primal hunger, I began to search for any kind of work, no matter how menial. I just needed to eat. I came across a small lumberyard where men were loading and unloading heavy planks of wood. I approached the foreman, my voice weak from lack of food and sleep. "Please," I said, "I need to work, I just need to eat." He looked me over, seeing my desperation. "You have to bring a guarantor," he said, "a standard procedure to prevent theft." My heart sank. "Please," I begged again, "I actually ran away from home. Just help me out. I don't want to steal. I don't want to do anything illegal. Just let me have something to eat." Perhaps he saw a flicker of the honest man I once was, or maybe he just took pity on me. He gave me a job. The task was simple and brutal: carry heavy planks of wood from one area of the yard to another. It was backbreaking, physical labor, the kind my body was completely unaccustomed to. For 3 grueling hours I hauled timber under the hot sun, my muscles screaming in protest, my hands quickly becoming raw and blistered. I, the tech-savvy student with a white-collar job, was now a day laborer, my worth measured only by my physical strength. I pushed through the pain, motivated only by the thought of a meal. After what felt like an eternity, the work was done. I was exhausted, covered in sweat and sawdust, my body aching in places I didn't know could ache. The foreman came over and pressed some money into my hand. I looked down at my payment for 3 hours of intense physical toil. It was 500 naira. The number struck me with the force of a physical blow. 500 naira. This was a sum I would have once thrown away on a single, thoughtless bet without a moment's hesitation. I used to place bets with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and here was the tangible value of money, earned through sweat and pain. That 500 naira was perhaps the most important money I have ever earned. For the first time in years, I truly understood the value of money. It wasn't an abstract number on a screen or a tool for chasing losses. It was 3 hours of my life, it was aching muscles, it was splinters in my hands. That night, even though I was wrecked and still had to sleep by the roadside, something had fundamentally changed within me. The lesson had been learned in the most painful way possible. I was a man from a good family who had never lacked anything, and I had thrown it all away to learn a lesson that a simple laborer already knew by heart. Lying by the roadside, clutching the 500 naira I had earned through sheer physical agony, I knew my time as a fugitive had to end. The fear of prison was still very real, but it was now overshadowed by a greater fear: the pain I was causing my family by my absence. My cowardly escape was only hurting them more. I had to go back. I had to face the consequences of my actions, whatever they might be. I couldn't let my parents, especially my father, face the authorities on my behalf. The thought of them being held accountable for my crimes was a burden too heavy to bear, even in my broken state. I had to return and stand for myself. The first step was to bridge the chasm I had created. I couldn't just show up at their door. I needed an intermediary, someone who could soften the ground before my return. I thought of a man who was very close to my father, a cleric whom he deeply respected. I called this man, my voice shaking with a mixture of shame and resolve. I confessed everything to him, holding nothing back. I told him about the gambling, the stolen money, the lies, and my desperate flight from home. Every person who heard the full story had the same reaction: shock and sadness. They could never have imagined me, the person they thought they knew, venturing into such darkness. This cleric, a man of great wisdom and compassion, listened patiently to my entire story. He understood the gravity of the situation, but he also saw the flicker of repentance in my heart. He promised he would speak to my dad. He spent hours, many hours, talking to my father, calming his anger, and convincing him to show mercy. He acted as a mediator, explaining the nature of addiction and pleading my case not as an excuse for my actions, but as a context for my fall. He worked to transform my father's righteous fury into a willingness to help his lost son find his way back. This intervention was crucial. Without it, the door home might have remained locked forever. The cleric's efforts paid off. My father's heart softened. He called me. His voice was not warm, but it was not filled with the disowning rage I had fled from. It was weary, heavy with pain. "Where are you?" he asked simply. I told him which state I was in. His instruction was direct and unambiguous. "Come home today." There was no negotiation, no discussion. It was a command. I knew I had to obey. I spent the next day doing more of the grueling plank-carrying work, scraping together just enough money for the bus fare. With every plank I lifted, I felt like I was paying a small penance, earning my passage back to the life I had almost completely destroyed. I returned home a changed man, but the hardest part of my journey was still ahead. My father looked at me, his eyes holding a universe of pain and disappointment. He asked me a simple question: "Are you on your own now?" It was his way of asking if I was truly ready to take responsibility, to stand as a man and face what I had done. He then said the words I had been dreading: "You have to go to your workplace and explain to them." The thought filled me with a cold, paralyzing fear. How could I possibly walk back into that office, the scene of my greatest shame, and face the people I had betrayed? It felt impossible. But my father was resolute. He would not let me hide. And in an act of paternal love that still breaks my heart to remember, he said he would go with me. He, a man of immense pride and integrity, would follow his disgraced son to his former workplace. He would stand beside me as I was subjected to ridicule and judgment. That very day, we went to the office. The moment we walked through those doors is burned into my memory forever. It was the lowest point of my entire life. All the people who had once looked up to me, who saw potential in me, were now staring at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. It was in that sterile office environment, surrounded by the wreckage of my career, that the final, definitive turning point occurred. I had already made a resolution to quit gambling, but what I saw that day cemented it into an unbreakable vow. I looked over at my father as he began to speak to my former bosses. He was begging for me. He was pleading for their mercy, for them to not press charges. And as he spoke, I saw something I had never seen in my entire life. I saw my dad shedding tears. My strong, stoic, proud father was weeping because of me. He was crying out of shame and love, begging for the son who had brought such disgrace upon his name. That sight shattered something deep inside me. It was a pain more profound than any financial loss, more humiliating than any personal failure. To see my father, my hero, brought to tears, begging on my behalf, it was an image of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. In that moment, any lingering temptation, any shadow of the gambler's what if, was completely and utterly extinguished. How could I ever go back to the thing that had caused this? How could I ever risk putting that look on my father's face again? It was impossible. Nothing in the world, no potential jackpot could ever be worth that. That was the day the addiction truly died. In the aftermath of that devastating day at my old office, a new clarity emerged from the chaos. I knew that simply wanting to stop was not enough. I needed to build a new foundation for my life, one strong enough to resist the powerful pull of my old habits. My recovery, my true repentance, rests on three essential pillars. The first and most powerful pillar is the memory of my father. The image of his tears is seared into my soul. It is my ultimate deterrent, my constant reminder of the real cost of gambling. You know, it is not about money. It is about the pain inflicted on the people you love. That memory alone is a fortress against temptation. The second pillar was forged in the dirt and grime of my self-imposed exile. Honestly, I don't know what spirit moved me to leave the state, but that journey was a brutal but necessary blessing. It forced me to experience the true value of money. The memory of carrying heavy planks, my body aching and my hands bruised, all for a mere 500 naira, fundamentally rewired my brain. I used to throw away thousands, tens of thousands on a single bet without a second thought. Now, I understand what that money represents. It represents labor, time, and life energy. That hard-earned lesson in the lumberyard resonates within me every day, a powerful reminder of what real work feels like. The third pillar is the pledge I have made, not just to myself, but to everyone around me. I have pledged to my family, to my wife, and to the world through this very story that I will never go back. I know that flesh is weak, and that a pledge alone can be broken. This brings me back to my roots, to the religious upbringing I deviated from so disastrously. I realized I could not do this on my own. I had to come back to my senses and move closer to God. I was brought up in faith. And in my darkest hour, I understood that only by returning to that faith could I find the spiritual strength to overcome this demon. These three pillars, my father's tears, the value of hard work, and my renewed commitment to my faith and my family, are the cornerstones of my new life. They are not abstract ideas, they are powerful, lived experiences that have reshaped my perspective. They are the reasons I know, with every fiber of my being, that I am done with gambling forever. It is a vow I made in the depths of hell, and one I intend to honor for the rest of my life, a life I am so fortunate to still have. Throughout this entire nightmare, from the very first lie to the final, devastating confession, there has been one constant, unwavering light in my life: my wife. I find myself surrounded by good and loving people, but honestly, her support has been the bedrock upon which I can even begin to rebuild. She is a remarkable woman. I met her back in school, long before this darkness took hold, and she has been by my side ever since. Her support has been the greatest, most undeserved gift of all. When she finally learned the full truth, she had every right to leave me. Instead, she chose to stay and help me fight. A significant part of how I fell into this bondage was my secrecy. I hid the addiction from her, building a wall of lies between us. The moment I finally tore down that wall and opened up to her, everything changed. Now, there are no more secrets. She is my partner in recovery. Any money that comes into our home, she sees it, she helps manage it. She is not a frivolous woman who would squander our resources on luxurious things. She is a true companion, a partner whose value is not in money but in love, trust, and shared struggle. Her presence is a constant source of strength. Her forgiveness and faith in me are powerful motivators. Seeing her down, seeing my mother down, seeing my father cry, how could I possibly look at these people, the ones who love me most, and even think about going back to the poison that hurt them so deeply? The answer is simple: I can't. There is absolutely no going back. The very idea is repulsive to me now. My wife and I have talked about it, about the image of my father crying. That scenario is the ultimate line in the sand. To cross it again would not just be a relapse, it would be a complete betrayal of the second chance she has given me. I have siblings who look up to me, a child who needs a father and a wife who deserves a husband. My responsibility to them is now crystal clear. My pledge to stop is not just a promise to myself, it is a covenant with my family. I have pledged down to the bottom of my heart that I have stopped, and they believe me. They are walking this path of recovery with me. Her support, combined with the painful lessons I have learned, creates a powerful defense. The love of a good woman, a love that has endured the worst a man can do, is a powerful reason to become the man she has always deserved. If my story can serve any purpose, let it be as a stark and desperate warning. I am speaking to anyone out there who is thinking about starting, or who is already caught in the early, seemingly harmless stages of betting. Please, I beg you, do not go there. Do not take that first step. It is a path that leads to a cliff, and honestly, you will not see the edge until it is too late. It will ruin you. It is not a question of if, but when. It ruined my family. It destroyed my career. It dismantled my life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but shame and regret. This is not a game you can win. People may hear stories of big wins. They may see the flashy advertisements promising easy money and a life of luxury. It is all a lie. It is a carefully constructed illusion designed to lure you in. You can never win against the house. I will keep saying this because it is the most important truth. You can never win the house. They have designed the system for you to fail. The small wins they allow are just bait to keep you hooked, to make you believe you have a chance while they slowly bleed you dry. It is a predator, and you are its prey. Some of you might be in it now, you might be winning, you might think it is okay for you, that you are different, that you have it under control. You might think my story is just one of bad luck. I am here to tell you that your luck will run out. The fun you are having now will turn to tears later. The thrill will be replaced by a desperate, gnawing anxiety. The choice you have right now is to realize your mistake while you still can and just stop it. Get out now. Find another way, a legitimate way to make money and build a life. Betting is not a career path. It is not an investment strategy. It is not a way of life. It is a disease, a demon that promises you the world while it steals your soul. It took the trust of my parents, the love and security of my wife, the respect of my colleagues, and my own self-worth. It has ruined me in every conceivable way. Please, listen to the voice of a man who has walked through this hell. Turn back before you suffer the same fate. It is not worth the price you will inevitably have to pay. Despite the devastation, this is not the end of my story. It is, I pray, the beginning of a new one. I stand now in the ashes of the life I burned down, but I am not without hope. By the grace of God and the unwavering love of my family, I have been given a second chance. The path forward is steep and uncertain. I don't know where to start from. I am facing a mountain of debt. My final year of school hangs in the balance, with exams looming and tuition fees that seem impossibly high. The fear of having to defer my admission, after I've come so far, is a heavy weight on my shoulders. But I am no longer alone in this fight. The very act of sharing this story, of confessing my deepest shames to the world, is a step towards healing. I have been told that my school fees will be paid, that I will write that exam, that I will not have to defer my admission. This kindness from others, this belief in my redemption is a powerful gift. It gives me the strength to believe that the debts can be cleared, that my marriage can be fully restored, and that my relationship with my family can heal from the deep wounds I inflicted. The hope is that everything can and will come back to normal. I have working experience, I have technical skills. The certificate from my degree is the final piece of the puzzle I need to rebuild my professional life. I just need to get there. I am clinging to the prayer that God will let me finish, that I will be able to stand on my own 2 feet again and provide for my family in an honorable way. The journey out of this 10-0 deficit is a marathon, not a sprint. It will take time, patience, and a level of honesty and humility I have never had to practice before. But for the first time in a long time, I can see a glimmer of light ahead. The support I have received has been overwhelming. My wife, my parents, even strangers who have heard my story, they have all rallied around me. This support is not something I deserve, but it is something I will honor for the rest of my life. I will repay their faith in me not with words, but with actions. I will rebuild my life on a foundation of truth and hard work. I will become the man they always believed I could be. The ashes are still warm, but from them, I am determined to rise. I began this story by describing my life as a football match where the score was 10-0 against me. For a long time, I was obsessed with that score, desperately trying to claw back the goals, to somehow even the odds. I now understand that this was the wrong way to think. You cannot win a game that is rigged from the start. The only way to stop losing is to walk off the field. That is what I have done. I have forfeited the match against the house. I am no longer playing their game, by their rules. There is no going back into it. No, I can't go back to it again. My new life is a different game entirely. It is not about winning or losing money. It is about earning trust, rebuilding relationships, and finding value in things that cannot be bought or sold. The memory of my father's tears, the feel of splinters from carrying planks, the steadfast love of my wife, these are the new goalposts. Success is no longer measured by a winning bet, but by a day lived with integrity. It is measured by being a good husband to my wife, a good son to my parents, and a good father to my child. This is a game I can win. I have pledged to myself, to my family, and to God that I have stopped. This is not a temporary ceasefire. It is a permanent peace treaty with myself. The addiction is a part of my story, but it will no longer define my future. By coming closer to God, by leaning on the support of my family, and by holding on to the painful lessons I have learned, I have built a defense that cannot be broken. Any money that comes in, my wife sees it. There are no more secrets. There is only transparency, accountability, and a shared commitment to a better future. To everyone who has listened to my story, thank you. Your support has been a lifeline. I pray that my experience serves as a warning to those who might follow my path and as a message of hope to those who are already lost in the darkness. It is possible to stop. It is possible to rebuild. The score may seem impossible, but you can choose to start a new game today. A game where you set the rules and where the prize is not a fleeting jackpot but a life of peace and purpose. That is the game I am playing now, and with God's help, it is a game I will not lose.